right. I have so many amazing friends. It's really fun. And Danielle Sherman is a friend by proxy of my little brother. And so good on him for having great people in his life and women that I can then call my own friends, even though you're much younger than I am, but it makes me feel young and exciting when I talk to you. And you're so accomplished. So today we're going to do, usually I focus a lot on like scientific evidence and what science means for women's cancer prevention, but I really like to get into women who are just badasses and entrepreneurial and fiery and smart and interesting, because I think there's an empowerment piece there that's really important for women, and that translates into how we take care of ourselves, how we think about ourselves, and what we do for ourselves to keep a healthy life. So Danielle, you're going to have to go through this, but my quick bio on you is that you've been an entrepreneur essentially all your life.
True.
You've been working it since you were probably in single digits, maybe early double digits. And then notably, as a very young adult, co-founded The Row with Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, then went on to work with Alexander Wang at Tea by Alexander Wang. And maybe there was something else in between, and now have launched your own absolutely stunningly beautiful jewelry line, which I think is one of those jewelry brands that will stand the test of time and be around forever and ever and only get more valuable as time goes on. So tell me more about the entrepreneurial spirit that you have, the fire in your belly, and how and why and when it started.
I think, thank you for having me. This is a dream. It's funny, when we've known each other since I've been in my teens.
About 12 years old.
Yes. So this is like incredible to be coming at this time in our lives together and interviewing
You're
and
like the little
having a good
sister
talk.
I wished for my little sister,
Aww.
but I didn't have a little sister, just a little brother.
Well, I'm happy to be in your proxy now.
Yes.
I think I was born with fire in my belly. I think so many women that I know, yourself included, it's you're born with intention. You're born with a drive. You're born a certain way. Genetics, being a parent of two, I didn't, we all study Freud. We all study, about human genes and genetics and environmental versus genetics. And I used to be a true believer in environment and how that really influences the child, which it does. But then having had my own genetics, I feel like are more than 50% of the makeup of your child. So I've learned that you're kind of born a certain way. And I think many women that I've been fortunate enough to meet along my career have been born with that fire. When I was very young, my dad passed away of a heart attack when I was age 5. So I was raised by a single mom with a teacher's credentials. So she had somehow managed to raise 2 kids in LA with, not a safety net behind her and how she was going to go about doing so. So she became my role model immediately. And she raised the 2 of us. Originally, she had to take any job that she would pay her, which was like tech related, even though she's not tech at all. And then
this is back in the day tech.
This is back in the day tech, where like the first, Mac computer, like this was like super. This is when it was like very few people even had access to technology. So she was offered a very junior position working for someone. This is in Northern California at the time. Because my dad died suddenly, she really it was a friend of a friend of a friend got her this position. So seeing my mom having to take roles, career paths that weren't necessarily by choice, I think undoubtedly influenced me. And then being and having the gift of choice was a big thing my whole life in my career. So I've always taken that very seriously. As I think one should, having that gift and being granted that gift, one should take advantage of that. So anyway, my mom raised both my sister and I, who was 9 at the time. I was 5. And we ended up moving back to Southern California. She got a position working at Full House, and she was the onset teacher there. And from there, she kind of then started building a career and being an on-set studio teacher. Her call times were 5 a.m. She sometimes didn't come home till 10. So I quickly, even though I was 5, very quickly, probably age 9, age 8, I was like actually preparing dinners, like for the family. And I always loved to cook as a young child.
Is it funny, just to break in one sec, how you were the younger sister?
In doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I was similar role in my family. It was like, that age it was almost swapped. And I love your sister, but it was like, you were the mom, you were the mini mom.
And she was kind of the caretaker, like just the one who was always there. And I'm sure she was like, making sure I got home on time and I came home safely from school and all of those things. But I became kind of like the at-home caretaker because my mom was on set. So very early on, I was preparing dinners for the family, learning how to massage a chicken and like, watching like funny, like actually we weren't even watching things at the time because we didn't really have computer access. But I don't know, somehow I came across something where I was like, this is how you massage a chicken and this is how you make clam pasta.
Probably from a cookbook.
Bonglais, it must have been a cookbook. But I was doing that. So very early on, I was, that role in my home. And then at age 15, I actually used to be playing sports in high school and I got injured. And I was like, what am I going to do with all of my time? Even though we both of us graduated from a college prep high school. So it was still very demanding academically, but I knew I needed to do something with my after school time. So I had started acting and my Nana at the time, Florence, would take me on castings. And I landed like a very silly role. I was older camper number 1 in Disney's The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. My aunt ended up getting hired as a studio teacher. My mom was then hired by my aunt to also be the on-set teacher. And then I had barely an acting role. I had one line in the poker scene, which ended up getting cut. Great. But I still get residual checks to this day. But that then gave me some money where then I could start my own business. So at age 15.
And your mom gave you access to that?
Yes, she did. She did.
Which is kind of brilliant and not necessarily normal.
No, not necessarily normal. I mean, I'm so far from the entertainment industry and that and knowing and understanding how it works. However, I do believe that one can have access and the parents always get a percentage too if they want. But my mom just gave me everything. And then I started a leather accessory company where I was doing very avant-garde statement jewelry, but in leather. So big leather neckbands that had grommets on them. And I would take peacock feathers and like assemble them inside.
Where did you get all the materials?
So I would go with my mom because I was 15, so I couldn't drive yet. So my mom would take me to like leather houses, like on Western here in LA, downtown LA. I would just somehow research them, find them out, because also we didn't have like computers really then. And she would take me and I would just buy like pieces of leather. And then I would take them to a shoe factory and I would draw and sketch my designs. And then he would manufacture them. A very small scale, of course.
But why leather? Like, do you remember the motivation?
I mean, it's bizarre.
I mean, it was really popular at the time. I remember having leather bracelets
cuffs,
and cuffs and stuff.
I mean, simultaneously, like after I had launched this, first brand.
What was it called?
It was under my name.
Okay.
I still have the little labels that got sewn in. Danielle Sherman with a little star in between. My mom, of course, kept them. But so I don't know why I was interested in that, but I just was. I think listening to one's intuition, I think I was always just like, whatever I like, maybe other people will like it. So that was something I was into. And then not long after, Dolce & Gabbana launched like leather belts with like grommets and studs and everything. So it became a trend.
You were so ahead of the time.
Somehow it became a trend, which is bizarre. But I was really into it. And so I was like, well, who's going to wear this, right? Because it's also not, like 15-year-olds are not going to wear this. However, I was like, who's going to wear this potentially are musicians. So then I got this directory, hundreds of pages of wardrobe stylists, which maybe it exists today, maybe it doesn't. It's probably all online now. And I would call one by one, starting with alphabetical order.
On your home phone?
On my home phone, of course, when I got home from school, and I would call one by one. And by this time I turned 16, I could start driving. And so then during my free time at school, you'd have like an hour and a quarter off, right? Where you could kind of leave campus for a minute. I would leave campus and I would rush to Paramount Studios, whatever the studios I would take me in and the stylist would take me in. And I would meet with these stylists and show them my collection.
Were they expecting a 16-year-old to show up?
Absolutely not. But I would like,
you've always been very mature beyond your years, but you were still 16.
And
I
still sound 16.
And you look really young still.
Yeah. So I would like call them, and lower my voice when I would speak to them. And meet with them. And my stuff at one point were like on the Dixie Chicks. And I mean, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen were wearing some of my pieces and some videos that they were doing. And, it was great. It was something that fulfilled a void. And it was my first, I guess, business kind of like having a job and self-funded. And it was exciting. And then I also simultaneously, while I was reaching out to wardrobe stylists, I met with an agent at the New Mart, which is adjacent to the California Mart. And they represent every brand, like clothing brands, jewelry brands, et cetera. And so I met with an agent there and I somehow just found someone who represents jewelry. And she took me on as well. And then she started selling my pieces at different stores in the US.
Like where?
One was in the Beverly Center. I'm like completely blanking on names because I don't remember, but it was just like a few stores. I think I was maybe in like 3 stores. Like it wasn't multiple
stores. It's like
stores.
Incredibly exciting.
I can't remember the names. I'm sorry.
No, it's
however,
so cool.
It was kind of my first introduction, but that entrepreneurial spirit, I now in retrospect, I guess has been there. So it taught me a lot. I didn't make any money from it, but it definitely taught me a lot. And then when I was applying to colleges, that was something I could speak to. So not only having a loss of a father, but then utilizing that loss in a way where I then was incredibly just, I just kind of grew up and I just started taking care of myself and my family. And then in turn, started a business and learned from that. So I think, along all of these milestones in our lives, right? Like the goal is, even if one is so painful and challenging at the time, you find ways in time, like time heals. I really believe that, to pivot and see how you can utilize that and what you learned from that into something else, So for me, it was working.
Yeah. My friend Natasha Wagner, who's my older sister's best friend, who I love too, and is now my friend. She says loss is like a rock in your pocket. And it's sometimes really heavy, but you get used to carrying it around.
Oh, interesting.
But when you focus on it for one reason or another, something happens, something reminds you, you bump yourself and you're like, oh, that rock is there. And it never truly goes away. But sometimes it's lighter and sometimes it's heavier. And for me, I think some people would say that's really sad. Like, time should heal the rock, that heaviness should go away. But somehow it is this reminder that you had loss, you had tragedy, and look what you've done. I mean, it swallows a lot of people. It really does. And the loss of your parent at such a young age, it changes the trajectory of your life. But there are different roads you can take. And so it's kind of like this subtle reminder that's always with you that exactly what you said, you took it in probably before you even had recognition of doing it because you weren't mature enough to understand it, to find your and then figure out how you're going to be the best version of yourself. And that's pretty tremendous. I know you're not the kind of person who sits back and thinks, well, that was cool. And me neither, It's lemons into lemonade. But it is really important to remind yourself of that, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my mom ultimately, I was a tough kid, meaning I was very, very determined, very ambitious. And I think I wasn't one couldn't just put me in a box and follow directions and all of those things. And in that way, my mom, I give her full, accolades in terms of raising me and kind of steering me in the right path, because I could have easily gone the other way because I had a lot in me and and having that fire, I think a lot of really talented, creative people, I feel like you do see drug addiction. You do see
like the fire eats them as opposed to them learning how to tame and control it.
And I think the reason why I don't give myself the pat on the shoulder for that, I really owe that to my mom because she, being a teacher, also just really understands children and The first year was really hard for me when my dad passed, and I would draw my mom as a witch, and I just really didn't understand death, and I thought it was her fault.
You were 5.
I was 5. But it's like by getting out all of that anger and that frustration, and my mom knew it was healthy because ultimately she's like, she's getting it out.
Yeah.
She's expressing her feelings. And, nowadays we have terms for all of these things. But back then, when my mom was 40, when my dad passed, my age, 41 now, she just kind of instinctively knew how to handle me. So with her and because of her, I feel like I've been able to accomplish what I've accomplished in life, not just because I was born this way. It's also hugely because of how she was able to raise me.
And your mom's an angel. She's like the best of the best.
Everyone, all my friends are like, we love your mom. Like, I love my mom too.
Yeah.
And I think also in having a loss, like you really learn about people. Like you really those that are really good people, like you really keep them close, And my mom is like one of those just incredible, like she's like an angel. She's an amazing human being filled with so much love, also tough because she's been hardened by life and things. But she just really is an incredible person. I'm very lucky to have had her in my adult and younger life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So circling back, we were finished off with leather. Somehow that like dwindled away.
And then I went to school in New York.
And then you went to school in New York. And then what happened next?
And then after New York, I graduated with like an art history major. I went to Gallatin at NYU, which was a great school for me at the time because it gave me that kind of freedom to take classes at multiple schools. So to fulfill multiple interests. An intern on the side. And then after that, I had a brief position, like the only paying job I could get at Tahari ASL, which was a division of LA Tahari. And the reason why I was really excited by this position is that I was on the same floor as the tailors.
Ooh.
So basically,
like where the magic happens.
Yeah, it's like where all the magic happens. And so that was incredible opportunity just to like see it and experience it, even though I wasn't the one necessarily interacting. I would have like the visual understanding of how product was made. And so that I always had the fashion bug, but that was like my first fashion role. And then from there, I had moved back to LA after a few months there. It was a short-lived situation. And then we started the Row. That was fantastic. And after I was with them for a few years.
What did you like about it? Or what did you learn during that time?
It's just, like most positions and most companies I've worked for, it just like so much creative energy. Nothing was established before that we could work off of. After I was with them for a few years, then I had joined Alexander Wang, originally as his head designer, and I worked with him on runway. And then simultaneously, we started T, and he had asked me to do a small collection for him. And then T launched, and T took off. And so then from there, I started focusing on T. And then after I joined Alex, and I was there for 5.5 years, then I was at Eden as a creative director. So I was working for Ali Houston and Bono, who owned 51% of the company, and then 49% was owned by LVMH. So then I was creative director for Eden, and I came on board, and we were manufacturing in Africa. So the whole reason that company was created was to promote trade in Africa. So we were manufacturing our product ready to wear at the time when I was there. In Africa. So that was incredible, traveling a lot on behalf of the company.
And what did you love about that time?
It was incredible working for LVMH, like a big powerhouse, and presenting to them formal presentations and preparing for that. So I learned a lot about how to do that.
Did you know how to do that before?
No.
It was like on the fly?
No, but I'm pretty good on the fly.
Yeah.
Like I'm more natural. I'm one, like we actually discussed this the other day where I don't like to prepare a speech if and when I have to give one, even at a wedding. I like to know general things I'd like to address and points I'd like to make, but if I write something down, like it doesn't work. I don't work as well. I don't function as well that way. So I function better on the fly and speaking from the heart. So that was a great experience. It taught me a lot about working for, two incredible people, both LVMH and Ali and Bono, who are wonderful human beings. And then after that, I was doing runway. So I was their creative director. So then I felt like, okay, I've gotten runway down.
How old were you at
I've done this.
Ish?
I was 32.
30, yeah.
And then I moved out to LA. I had left Eden. I had my first child while I was
Eden
still
based?
There. Eden was based in New York.
So you went New York, you came back to LA, then you went back to New York.
And then I went back to New York. I went from New York working at Eden. And then I had my first child there. And then I was there for a few more months. And then I had resigned and moved to LA.
Okay.
And I have not moved back to New York for work since. And then I started my own consulting company just that would allow me the ability to essentially consult for whomever or in whatever. And also would give me and help with the finances living out here in LA.
And flexibility with the newborn.
And absolute flexibility with the newborn. So pretty quickly, I got a few consulting gigs. And then the main one that really moved the needle for me and then helped me launch Sherman Field essentially was working for Fast Retailing, which is part of Uniqlo, J-Brand, Comptoir, based in Tokyo, in Japan, their headquarters. And I had met them after I had left Eden a few months after. And then 2 years from there, after that, they then hired me as a consultant. So then I had a brand actually in Japan. It was Danielle Sherman 4+T. And originally it was just a capsule, meaning 12, 14 styles, very edited. And then it did well. And so then they said, can you design a whole collection? So that became a really awesome gig. And I was designing and sketching and doing color and doing fabrics and doing fittings. And the whole team came here the first year 5-6 times, a lot. And we did all of the a lot of the work together. And then I would fly to Tokyo twice a year and give presentations to the entire company. So that was really great because I never thought I would like consulting because I'm very hands-on and used to being in like every meeting and, being part of the decision process and like just really involved. But I ended up loving it because I was really only involved in the stuff that was really important and the things that I needed to be involved in, which I learned from that because I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like as a consultant, you'll do whatever they tell you to do because you're a consultant. So you're being hired to be there, be present. However, it was a great experience because I really got to be fully creative and work with the team, which they had an exceptional team actually. And I was very impressed with their team and pattern makers and everyone. I was able to finance Sherman Field entirely because I was able to funnel the money that I received from my consulting gig and then put that towards a new development. And the new development became Sherman Field.
So when did you start to think about the fact that you were going to then launch your own brand at some point?
So I launched in 2000, basically in 2019, I believe, yes. But I was concepting the brand for 3 years prior. So in 2016, in 2016, I became going from an LLC to an S Corp. And that's when I was really studying the fine jewelry, the history of jewelry, going to the Getty Center here in Los Angeles. And you can rent up to 10 books at a time or check out 10 books at a time. And so I just sit there in a beautiful Richard Meier building. And I had the luxury of time then having only one child. And I could sit there for a few hours and just like dive into books, which has always been my love ever since I've been a kid, and going through the stacks at libraries and at Bope's library at NYU. And so I would spend time doing that. And I gave myself that time because I really was a neophyte in the field of jewelry. So I wanted to really learn and understand it. And there I found the retro period, which was all about 1940s. It came after the First War, statement pieces and bold and dramatic jewelry and pieces that could convert into other things. So maybe you have a necklace, but then the key ring on the necklace, like our pieces then convert into something else, or like what was famous then in the 30s and later 40s was that a brooch would then become a pendant, and that ear clips could turn into a pendant and vice versa, or a necklace had multiple clasps, so you could take one necklace and becomes 2 bracelets. So it was the idea of convertible jewelry. But that stemmed originally from, one, not having so much. So like women didn't like consume as much back then, but also like a scarcity of materials. So only so many things were produced as well. So that's why even during that period, you would see white gold and yellow gold pieces mixed into one, because there was like, let's say, more zinc than copper. So then there was a reduction in alloys available or metals available, and that's what influenced the jewelry. But then coming after the war, it was all about like, okay, finally we were in this Great Depression. Now we're out of it. So now let's go out and let's celebrate life. And women often did that with their jewelry. And I just loved all of that. And I was like, this brand, whatever it is, I still didn't know entirely what it was going to be at that time, is going to be reflected of that period. So then I started going to shows in Vegas. They have like amazing vintage trade shows and 250 plus vendors. And I would go and meet with go from vendor to vendor to vendor. And all the pieces, and many of which I studied, and creators such as Georges L'Enfant, who worked for Cartier, and he was a maker and a factory producer. And he actually made a lot of the jewelry and designed it as well. And I'd see and get to hold the pieces he created. So a lot of these collectible pieces that you won't ever see because they're in vaults or they're locked up or they're part of Cartier's archive or whomever, Van Cleef, you would see at these shows. So that then I could feel it. And I was like, oh, I love the weight of all these pieces. I love the way it makes you feel. It feels comforting. And it's not just some like dainty thing. It's a keepsake. It's an heirloom. It's something that will be passed down and has been. That's why it's still here today. So then I was like, okay, after that show, I had seen 2 chains, like neck chains that I had liked. And that was it, which is wild when you think of it. If you're meeting with 250 plus vendors and you're literally going to every stall and seeing their wares, I was like, why is there a dearth of chain?
Yeah.
I was like, this is where I'm going to begin.
Okay.
So I began with chain. And to this day, we are known most for our chain and the weight of the chain and things like that, because all of our pieces are solid 18 karat. Our own proprietary blend actually of 18 karat yellow gold. So all of these different things led to then me launching the brand Sherman Field. And then the name comes from my grandparents. They had multiple lines in London, starting in the 50s, all the way through the late 60s. And Sherman Field was their last kind of premier brand before they sold the company. And it was women's ready to wear, but tailoring for women, essentially. And so it was like the full look, I don't think they did shoes, but they did nylons, like little nylons, and the skirt and the petticoat and how it all went together, the little pinafores. And so they created the look for a woman. And it was both my grandma who she was the one who actually financed my grandfather, and they started this company.
Your paternal grandparents.
Yes, my paternal grandparents. So my grandma was very successful with her first husband, who she then later left, but she was very successful in her first shop that she opened in Surrey in London. And from there, she sold it. And she did well financially from that sale. And she was born very poor, actually. She was like one of 10, my grandmother. So I think she was born with a lot of fire in her belly.
Yeah, I can see this connection for sure.
It helps knowing the full history. Otherwise, it's like, okay, yeah, well, sure. But I think this is the genetic line. Yeah. And I'm very much like my dad, who was English, and then his mother. So she started her own company when she was quite young. Being one of 10, she married her first husband, who then financed her first store. And the store did incredibly well. And so then when they sold it, she divorced her first husband and she married the love of her life, who was then my grandfather, Sam Sherman. And then over the course of their adult years, they founded multiple brands, and Sherman Field was one of them. So I was like, this is a great name. It can be, for all sexes. Eventually, we can also categorize, and we can do knitwear and trousers, and we can do multiple, we're trademarked multiple categories. So we can build it out over time. But right now, and for many more years to come, it will just be jewelry, because it's a lot. It's a lot to manage, especially when we're doing it the way we're producing. We're producing things very slowly. We now have a sizable inventory, but it takes a lot of time. Like one chain, depending on the piece, takes a minimum of 20 hours to produce end to end. So we're mixing the gold in-house. It's our own 18 karat warm yellow gold. And then we're casting it, and then we're linking it, and then repolishing it. And some of our pieces are polished 4 times to get like a super high shine. So, it's making pieces the way I've always like kind of wanted to produce things. And now having the opportunity running the company myself, I don't have, a panel of VCs
You're
telling me what
yourself.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really an intuitive direction when we build out certain groups and things like that. It's kind of what I'm excited about and what I'm feeling and what I'm into. And then it takes generally 6 to 8 months, sometimes a year, just for one kind of category to launch, like our lockets or our pave diamond pieces. We're working on engagement rings right now, which is really exciting, but we're not rushing the process because you kind of have to respect the process is what I've always felt, but now I can really embrace it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're when I think about genetics, like when you have your own children, you're like, oh, they should be like half me and half their father. And then it's not. I mean, there's lines from all over the place and grandparents and great-grandparents on each side and aunts and uncles that feed into who we are.
Right.
And it's pretty incredible to grow into a person and then understand kind of where you came from and then your own twist and spin on it.
Right.
But I mean, I never really understood or knew really the intricacies of your grandma and your dad's mom and how that influence, whether you even knew it was there when it was happening.
No, I had no idea.
Is pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how deliberate you are and how determined, deliberate, at the same time, and patient, at the same time when you are, a go-getter to the max is quite a mix. It's really hard to find. Most people don't have that. You're kind of one or the other.
Right.
You're not hasty. And at least with your businesses.
Well, I'm definitely, I wouldn't say I'm not impatient. Like I am definitely impatient at times. However, I do respect the process. So I think ultimately I want things to move quickly and I'm hard on myself. Like I really want things to be at a certain level and things to be moving in a certain way. I've also worked for many companies where I've worked with bigger teams. So I've had more people to be able to allocate and delegate to. And so now that we're such a small company, I'm doing the website, I'm doing the photo retouching, I'm shooting the stills, I'm, doing the cap cut for the video editing, which I just learned not too long ago. So it's like because I'm in this position now, like I'm really wearing many, 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 many hats. I've worn many hats throughout my career, but this is like full force because it's also being funded by me. So then it's like, okay, do I pay $2,000 to have an editor edit this footage, or do I just do it because I'm probably going to ask this person to redo it? Yeah. So then I learned the program, which is really straightforward, thankfully. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I feel lucky that I have this past as well, because as an adult, it makes more sense to me. But growing up, because my dad passed away, being English and being tied to my grandmother and the history there, I didn't know much about him other than the stories my mom would tell me. I was so young that sadly, I don't remember him very much. And all my memories are really relegated to photographs being like, oh yeah, I kind of remember us on the lake in Yosemite.
Well, 5 years old is sort of when you start remembering things.
Yeah,
most people, it's at 4 or 5 years old where your memories actually become cemented into your long-term memory bank. I mean, and so you were right on the cusp.
Right.
Interesting. So photographs and things, it becomes a lot of, I was not 5 years old. My mom died. I was 21, but there are memories I know. And some of them I'm like, do I remember that? Or is that someone telling me about that? And now I remember it that way. Or was I not even there?
Yes.
And it sort of doesn't matter because I'm just happy I have it.
Yes.
But when you start to think about it, there are some where I'm like, I have no idea if I experienced that myself or someone told me about it.
Right. I know. And that's something we'll always just have to live with. And it's okay because, and it's just our lives, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's now, I actually had to hire a researcher to find even Sherman Field. I didn't even know about the company.
That's incredible.
So I knew about their bigger companies that took off and did well. They were selling in Harrods and they were selling internationally, all over the world, Saks to the US. Anyway, but what I discovered in hiring a researcher is that this woman, she's a teacher, Liz Trenengza. I don't know how to pronounce her last name correctly. She actually did her dissertation on my grandparents.
No way.
Yes. My mom had found her blog. So at the time, it was all about blogs. Now it's not. But my mom had come across her blog online and she was writing all about my grandparents. My mom's like, Danielle, you should talk to this person. So it took almost a year to get her to do research because she was so busy working and working on multiple things at the time. But eventually she let me hire her and she discovered Sherman Field in the Ambassador magazine, which was like a really big magazine at the time in London, huge format, amazing editorials, advertorials, et cetera. My grandfather had won an award with the Ambassador for the work that he had done with the companies that he had owned with my grandmother. Anyway, so I learned about my lineage through someone outside of my family who happened to have a penchant for the work that they created.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is fantastic. So each snippet, she even found birth certificates of my great-grand. I didn't know she was like a magazine shop owner and she was French. And they had lived off Savile Row. So my great-great-grandparents, my great-great-grandfather was a tailor himself. And then my great-great-grandmother was a magazine shop owner, and she's the one who was French. So anyway, I had learned all about my history, and I knew nothing of prior because these were things and facts that my mom never knew.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's exciting to learn about your history and then be able to take something that they created and then rebrand it into something that you then can create.
Or you had already started creating and then it sort of just all came together really organically and naturally.
Yes,
pretty amazing.
Did. And I was torn whether I used my name, which I feel funny about anyway, using my name for a brand, or using a brand name that existed. And I was like, oh, what? I was talking to my husband. He's like, that's such a cool name.
It's such a good name.
And it wasn't really like there's a football field called Sherman Field. Beyond that, it wasn't trademarked. Yeah. So we're like trademarked in multiple classes at the moment. But yeah, it was very exciting. And I redrew the logo because we only had this one image that was in the Ambassador magazine. It was an advertorial. It was our first post on Instagram. And it's an image of a model in a pinafore in front of a Rolls Royce with a driver and Big Ben in the background. And then it says Sherman Field Master Tailor. And so I took that one image and I resketched the logo. And so we could then use it. So now, of course, we use it for all collateral, but it didn't exist essentially. And then instead of doing Master Tailor, because we're not a tailoring brand as of yet, we do Sherman Field 1967 since it existed in 1967.
That's awesome. So next you have in the wings, engagement rings.
Yes.
So just give me one thing that when you look forward, there's something behind your eyes that's like, ooh, I just know one day I'm going to do that, or I want to do that and have that be a part of this brand.
Well, I think I've taken time to launch and get into the world of engagement rings because like most things, I want to make sure I'm educated in this field. And even though I'm not GIA certified or anything like that, which is a certificate you get when you go through the courses, and it's a very prestigious certification, especially in the diamond arena. If you have a GIA cert in diamonds, you're a specialist. So I gave myself this time. We're 5 years in. And we started off with chain and rings. And since we've developed, of course, bracelets and earrings, et cetera. And we've tested the market with our diamonds, which have been performing. And the way we did diamonds was a little bit different in the sense that we've worked with both pave and channel set, and we fully encrust our chain. So we take our unique chain and then we cast it open to then set diamonds. So a lot of jewelry you see today with pave set diamonds, it's chain that's bought and then they drill out holes and then they set it. And that's why the chains kind of all look the same, whether it's a Figaro chain or what have you. So the uniqueness to ours is we're taking our custom chains that originally, the original design I sculpt from clay. So I'm taking my original designs that have been best performers, and then we're pave setting them. So I tested the market first with pave to see if it would even perform. And WSJ just did a feature on our pave diamonds, which was really helpful for the brand and brand awareness. And then from there, I said, we should work on this category. So it's been a long time coming, but I myself, when I was engaged, could not find a ring that I liked. And I was happy even not to wear a ring because if I'm going to put something on my body, like I have to absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So in the end, a woman who's worked with my husband for 10 years now, Camilla Frenzy, who's wonderful. Her mom is a jewelry specialist and has incredible background in fine jewelry. She helped me design a ring. However, it's cast in a different gold color than our gold. So I don't wear it today. However, thank you, Patricia, for helping me all those years. But the thing is, I realized that there's also an opportunity if I myself had trouble finding it in the same way that I had trouble finding chains that I like to wear, that there's a niche to fill. And I feel that there still is. And so our pieces are going to be much heavier and much more prominent, but finding ways to, if we have to use prongs and maybe we're doing it in an original way, approaching it differently. They have weight. They have our signature yellow gold, also working with different diamond shapes, not always just the traditional. So I like just kind of approaching it from a world where we've already created. So also building off our cigar rings and our barre rings and a world double band rings. So working off kind of styles that exist, but then also introducing a few new ones. So we're excited, but I have no idea when it's going to launch. And that's okay because it'll launch when it's ready. And that's kind of how all of our categories launch. The lockets took like over a year. I think that was a year and a half in development. It was also during COVID. It took a very long time because even the turning of the locket has to feel a certain way for it to like feel expensive. So like it can't just like flip. So like every part, every component, the photographs that we put in the locket have to fit under this tiny little lip. If the lip is too big, then other things can get in there. If it's too small, you can't slide the photograph in there. So then testing paper materials that can then fit in there that are water resistant. So then we spray. I mean, it's a process. So nothing I've learned as I've gotten older. I used to say, oh, that's easy. Or yeah, that's easy. I never use the word easy because I've learned nothing.
Nothing worthwhile is easy.
Nothing worthwhile creating your foundation. I mean, you probably had to cross hundreds of hurdles.
I mean, yeah, that you don't even know exist.
Yes.
You just get to them and you're like, okay, I can go over this, under this, around this, or through this. And I'm just going to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, it's like starting business. It's all the same.
Everything. And raising children, everything in life, being in a relationship, all of it.
Yes.
Never easy. If it's good and solid and worthwhile, it's not easy.
Yeah. Nothing's easy. So I feel like that's a word that like I quickly had to learn to remove because everything takes time.
Everything takes time.
Yeah. And like you said, if it's something in the end that has lasting qualities and will be on forever, it's something that will take time and it'll launch in due course, right?
Well, count me up for the ride. I love it. I am so thrilled to see what comes next from you. I know fast forward, it's a brand that will have, I mean, I didn't even know that you were thinking somewhere inkling about encompassing all types of fashion. And I mean, I can see everything coming out of your office from, I don't even know, clothes to bags to everything. I mean, it's just in your,
Thank you.
It's like in you. And I think it just comes out, as you said, when it's ready, and it'll take time and it'll be worth it.
Thank you. And when we find the right partners too, because I can only do so much. And then it's our artisans and our craftspeople who make it happen.
Yeah.
So that takes time.
Yeah.
So when it's all ready. But I would count you in. You're invited to every single launch.
It doesn't matter if I'm invited. I'm showing up.
Yeah, it's true. You're like, hey, is it ready? I'm here 2 weeks early. You're like, Amy.
Let me see it.
Amy, it's not ready yet. It's like your jewelry. It's not ready yet. But no, I love that you've been part of the ride from the beginning.
Just a little bit, but it's been beautiful and wonderful. And you're beautiful and wonderful and smart and engaging. And I think there's pieces of you that not everybody gets to see and not everyone knows about because they're personal. But it's what makes you you and so successful and living a life of purpose. And I think that's the goal for all of us. And for women, I think sometimes that doesn't come naturally. And I don't think a life is full and successful without purpose. And you found it. And you found it at a really young age, but have harnessed it over time. And to me, that's the most beautiful part of who you are. And everything you create, it's very evident in it. So thanks for letting me be your friend. And thanks for coming today. This was great.